Assalamu alaikum and good night. Shabbos, Hayim Yom Shishi. Today's Friday. It's Shmoina ve'esrim yomim l'chedesh Adarishon. Adarishon is always the extra Adar. And Adarishon always has 30 days, which means that Adar Sheni always has 2 days Resh Chedesh. Tomorrow Shabbos Mevarchim, which means it's Shekalim, and it's also Machar Chedesh, because Resh Chedesh is Sunday and Monday. Today is Chav Ches. Tomorrow is Chav Tes. And Sunday is Lamed. And Monday is Aleph, of Adash, of Adash Sheni. And we're learning a Mamer from Tafshin Lamed Alet. We're actually learning a Mamer which is the appropriate year for this year. This year we undertook to learn the Memorim of Tafshin Lamed Alet, Bli Neder. And we've done a lot of extra stuff. We've done a little bit from Tes Vav, a little bit from Tezayin, and then we did a few from Yud Zayin, the last few Mamorim from Yud Zayin. Now we're back to Lamed Al for a little bit, and then we're going to go back to other things. We're trying to do 6 Mamorim a month, not 2 Mamorim a week, but 6 Mamorim a month, which is quite a bit as it is. And now you have 2 short Mamorim. The first Mamer is Tisa, which is Shabbos Mevarchim Adar. Actually, it says Resh Chedesh Adar, so Shabbos Mevarchim was Mishpatim. And the next Kisisa is actually Purim. Purim must have been on a Friday. And there was no Fabrengen. It looks like there was no Fabrengen on Friday. Shabbos was the Purim Dike Fabrengen. And the Rebbe said again in Mamer Kisisa, because it was the Parshas HaShavua of Kisisa. And in that Mamer, there's a little bit about Purim, Ish Yehudi. It's a very interesting Mamer, Ish Yehudi. I looked at that Mamer already. It's the whole question is whether Ish Yehudi is Milas HaTeira or Ish Yehudi is Milas HaTfilah. We'll get to it when we get to the Mitzvah Shem. But today we're learning Mamer Kisisa, which the Rebbe said Resh Chedesh. Shabbos Parshas Truma Beis Resh Chedesh Adar, which was also Parshas Shekalim Tafshin Lamed Dalet. Now this Mamer is 4 pages, and 4 lines, and 5 words. It's not a long Mamer. But it's a Mamer. It's a Mamer. You have to really think when you learn a Mamer like this. And I guess on some level you would say that this Mamer is based on V'yadaita, which is in V'aschanan and Likutei Torah, which you'll see in footnote 23. In footnote 1, he's mitzayin to the Eira Torah and to Ateres in Tafshin Yud Aleph. Now, and I never learned, Ateres I don't remember, and Yud Aleph I should remember. I'm actually teaching it now to the Bachim in Chayve in Achei Tmimim. And I guess as I'm thinking about it, I could see the corollary between the 2 Mamorim. But this Mamer has a structure which is quite unusual, I think, for Mamorim of Kisisa, Mamorim of Emuna. And you learn the Mamer once, you learn the Mamer a second time. You think about the Mamer, you ask yourself how you're going to learn the Mamer. You teach the Mamer, you finish teaching the Mamer, you say, nah, I should have done it a different way. This is one of those Mamorim that I don't think you ever finish being ready to teach. But the clock is ticking, there's a schedule. And part of my schedule is that Friday we learn a Mamer. So I'm teaching you a Mamer because now I'm supposed to teach you a Mamer. If I had another day or 2, I could sit on this Mamer some more. Would it become better and clearer? I don't know. Would I be more comfortable teaching it? I don't know. But I don't have that time anyway. So here we go. We're going to learn the Mamer. Now let's start from the first idea. What the Rebbe is going to do in this Mamer is going to say as follows. There are 2 ideas. There's Emuna and there's ורעה Emuna. There's Emuna, is believing in the Eibishter, and there's the need for being zonim of fairness Emuna. You have to sustain the faith. What's unusual about this Mamer is rather than the typical approach where we say Emuna is attributed to Avraham Avinu and ורעה Emuna is attributed to Moshe Rabbeinu, the Rabbi is going to do something quite different. he's going to establish there's an Emuna from Avraham Avinu, and there's a Emuna associated with Avraham Avinu's Emuna, which is Hisbonenus. And then there's an Emuna of Moshe Rabbeinu. And the Emuna of Moshe Rabbeinu comes from the Torah. And there's another word, Emuna, associated with the Emuna of Moshe Rabbeinu, which is Machtas HaShekel. So rather than say that Emuna comes from Avraham, and Moshe, it's Mechazek Emuna, he's going to say, Emuna comes from Avraham, and there's a chizuk of that Emuna through the method of Hisbonenus. There's a second Emuna which comes from Moshe Rabbeinu, which, as you'll see inside, is negated Torah and Matan Torah, and the Hischaskos of that Emuna is the end of Machtas HaShekel. That's the structure of the Mamer, which is unusual, and it throws me off, and it makes me feel very unsure. Even as I'm teaching you the Mamer, I cannot make up my mind. I can't make up my mind if I'm teaching it correctly. I just can't think if I'm taking it correctly or not. I can't figure it out. So let's start with this. I'm going to start with two preliminary points. Point number one is, what is the meaning of Emuna itself? What does faith mean? It's very important to appreciate that Emuna doesn't mean I know there's a God, or I believe there's a God. Rather, Emuna means I have a relationship with God. Or as I like to tell my students, Emuna means when you put down the tool of your brain, which brings you to the recognition that there is a lakus, that there is a God, and you say, I'm not interested in further proof of the Eibishter, I'm interested in a relationship with the Eibishter. That's what the Emuna is. And that's called a deal. It's a leap. It's a leap of faith. Your Emuna may come from your Shekel. Your mind may tell you there's an Eibishter, and you may go through a study process where you question, Yegot, Nishgot, all of the things that people struggle with intellectually until they come to the conclusion that there's an Eibishter. And once they understand intellectually there's an Eibishter, then there's an idea where they put their brain down and they focus on the relationship itself, and that's the end of Emuna. Like I always tell you the story with that man, Morris, who I met by the Tanya Shem many years ago, who said to me, a very smart man, an engineer, a chacham. I asked him about his resolving the questions between religion and science, and his answer to me was, I don't care, I want a relationship with God. That's what he told me. I don't care, I want a relationship with God. End of story. I want a relationship with the Eibishter. That's what he said. That's Emuna. I want a relationship with the Eibishter. And this Maimon is going to say that Emuna, which means I want a relationship with the Eibishter, exists on two levels. It exists on the Avraham Avinu level and on the Moshe Rabbeinu level. And in each case, it needs a hischaskus. Avraham Avinu's Emuna, I want a relationship with God, needs hischaskus, so that what the Eibishter tells me to do, I do. And this is through Hisbonenus. And Moshe Rabbeinu's Emuna, which is an even higher Emuna, also needs hischaskus, and this hischaskus comes from Machtzis HaShekel, as the Rebbe is going to say in the Mamer. What the pshat is a besondere Zach, but Machtzis HaShekel is the hischaskus of the Emuna of Moshe Rabbeinu. But now I want to say something else, which doesn't say in this Mamer, but it does say in the Mamer of Yud Aleph, and I'm sure it says in the Mamer of Ateres, which I did not look up. And that is that the Maimonides speak about three Emunas, not two. There's Emuna of a Goy, Lahavru, and there's two Madregis Emuna of a Yid. And the Maimon of Yud Aleph, which I'm teaching, he calls it the Emuna of Ma'aminim, and the Emuna of Ma'aminim b'nei Ma'aminim. The Emuna of a Goy is in Mimalei Kalalman, the Emuna of a Yid as Ma'aminim is in Sovev Kalalman, the Emuna of Ma'aminim b'nei Ma'aminim, which is even higher than Sovev Kalalman. And the way it seems to me, although I can't say this for sure, when you learn this Maimer, the Rebbe is going to say that the Emuna of Avraham Avinu is the Emuna of Mimalei Kalalman, which Lahav Goy could also have, although he doesn't speak about Goyim at all in this Maimer. And the Emuna of Sovev Kalalman. And the Emuna of Moshe Rabbeinu is the Emuna which is even higher than Sovev Kalalman. So there's some similarity between this Maimer and the Maimer of Toshin Yud Aleph, but it's different. Because he's not saying that there's three Madregas of Emuna that are all attributable to Avraham Avinu and Moshe Rabbeinu is mechazik them, but rather there is two Madregas of Emuna, because we're not including the Emuna of a Goy. The first Madrega of Emuna is the Emuna in the Eibishter based on the Madregas of Mimalei Kalalman and Sovev Kalalman, which means I believe in the Eibishter based on the world. And in both cases, there's a world, and the world tells me about the Eibishter on the level of Mimalei Kalalman because of Chayes, and the level of Sovev Kalalman because of Havoya, because of Kiyum. But the Emuna itself is a leap. The Emuna itself is putting down the mind, putting down the Seichel, and having a relationship with the Eibishter on an Neshama level. When the Eibishter gave us the Torah, and as you'll see in the Mamer, Hashem Elokecha, we were introduced to a lakus, which is completely removed from the world, even higher than the Madrega of Sovev Kalalman. And this is the Emuna of Moshe Rabbeinu, and his chaskas the Emuna is Machzis HaShekel. So beprotius there's three Emunas. The Emuna, the guys knowing the Eibishter and the Emuna which comes from it, and the chaskas of that Emuna. A Yid knowing the Eibishter, like a descendant of Avraham Avinu, and the chaskas of that Emuna through the inyan of Hisbonenus, and the Emuna which we have from Moshe Rabbeinu, which has to do with Torah, and the chaskas of that Emuna which has to do with Machzis HaShekel. This is what the Mamer is going to be about. There's another point in this Mamer that I want to touch on, which is that Rebbe is going to speak to the idea of mitzvahs klolius. On page 95, the second paragraph of the first page, the Rebbe is going to speak to the sugya of mitzvahs klolius. And he's going to say, Machzis HaShekel is a mitzvah klolius because it's kefen nafshe, karbonis is a mitzvah klolius, and of course Emuna is an inyan kloli. And this is why the even Machzis HaShekel is so important, because Machzis HaShekel, besides for the fact that it's strengthening our Emuna, and it's strengthening our Emuna in the Madreg of Moshe Rabbeinu, which is strengthening our Emuna in the Madreg, which is after Matan Torah, it's strengthening our Emuna about an inyan, which is called in Yiddishkeit an inyan kloli. What is the meaning of inyan kloli? So I'll start with a story that Yid came to the Rebbe, not the Lubavitcher. A Yid came to the Rebbe. I heard this story from Rabbi Glukowski, and he was a Bachar at the time. And the Bacharim asked him why he came. So he said that he has an illness in his brain. And he's coming to the Rebbe because he knows that the Rebbe knows Kabbalah. And the Rebbe will tell him which mitzvah is connected to his brain. So he'll be able to do that mitzvah behidur, and it will heal his brain. I think it's an incredible sensitivity. That Yid, who was not a chassid, has a Yiddish shchush, that's an attitude. If I'll do a mitzvah which is connected to this part of my body, it'll heal me. So he went into the Rebbe, and he came out of the Rebbe, and the Bacham surrounded him a second time. And he said, Nu, ma Omar Hashem. What's the Eibishter gesagt? What's the Rebbe gesagt? What did the Rebbe tell you? What did the Ruach HaKodesh tell you? So he said that the Rebbe told him that the Emuna, that the Moyach is an Eiver kloli, and therefore you have to have his chaskos and a mitzvah klolis. And the Rebbe was matziyah to him that he should be mahader the mitzvah of Hashgacha Pratis. So there's three statements. The brain is an Eiver kloli, a general organ, and therefore you have to choose a general mitzvah. And what general mitzvah should you choose? The general mitzvah of Hashgacha Pratis. Let's start with the first point. What does it mean that the brain is a general mitzvah, a general organ? It means as follows. We have Ramach Evidim. We have 248 limbs in the body. But for something to be a limb, it has to be Basa Gidim Vatzomis. It has to have a bone. Like the Mishnah lists in Masechta Olis. And because of this, the most important parts of the body are not included in the Evadim. The brain is not one of the Evadim. The eyes, the eyeballs are not amongst the Evadim. Your tongue is not amongst the Evadim. The lungs, the heart, the liver, the spleen, the kidneys, the intestines. All of these critical limbs, organs, are not amongst the Ramach Evidim. But it's not because they're not important, but rather because it's Eivish HaNefesh Tluya Behem. It's an organ on which the whole body depends. So a limb in halacha, an Eiver, a limb in halacha is a part of the body which is by definition a part, which Chas v'Shalom you're missing when you could still live. And that's the chesed of Ramach Evidim, 248 limbs, which are 408 parts of the body that Chas v'Shalom a person could be without, and you could survive, and it corresponds to the Ramach mitzvahs. But then you have a vodam shanefesh tluya behen, organs on which the whole life depends, and this is discussed in Sefer Yetzirah. We know this from the Tikkun Leil Shvuos. And these evarim are connected to mitzvahs klolius, which leads us, of course, to the Rambam. The Rambam wrote a Sefer HaMitzvahs. And in the introduction to Sefer HaMitzvahs, the Rambam wrote Shoroshim. And Shoroshim means what is defined as a mitzvah and what is not defined as a mitzvah. And one of the rules is that mitzvahs klolius are not defined as a mitzvah. A general mitzvah is not a mitzvah. What is an example of a general mitzvah? How many times does it say in the Torah, Shmartem is called mitzvah, Asisa Mesam, guard my mitzvahs, do my mitzvahs. These are important statements that tell a Jew how they're supposed to live, b'klolos, in general. But they're not mitzvahs because they're not specific. Now, in Lomdis, examples for mitzvahs klolius would be Emuna itself. The Rambam paskins that the first mitzvah in Torah is Yediyas Hashem, to know and understand Hashem. But the mitzvah is Yediyah, not Emuna. And the Rebbe brings from the Bahag. Emuna is not a mitzvah because if you believe in Hashem, you don't need to be told to believe in Hashem. And if you don't believe in Hashem, it's not going to help that you're told to believe in Hashem. So Emuna is a pre-mitzvah. I like to call it a super mitzvah. Amongst the other examples of super mitzvahs is tshuva, according to some ways of understanding, and even the way the Rebbe explains the Rambam. And tefillah, according to certain Rishonim. The tefillah is not a mitzvah, not because it's not important, but because it's all important. All of Yiddishkeit depends on this mitzvah. I would argue that other examples of mitzvahs kloliyos would be simcha, and the Rambam is bringing that kas, kol hakeyes, omru razal, kol hakeyes, kil eved aved zara. It's not an aveda to get angry, but it's kil eved aved zara. L'chaydi, you could say that it's a mitzvah kloliyos, but v'tzarech here. There's many things that are not included in the Ramach mitzvahs or the Shasa mitzvahs Leisa said, not because they're not important, but because they're so important that they're not particular in Yonim. They go to the core, they go to the baseline, they go to the very essence of Yiddishkeit, and they're called mitzvahs kloliyos. So they don't count, B'minyan Ramach, they don't count in the 248 positive mitzvahs, but not because they're de'eraisa, not because they're not de'eraisa, because they're even higher than mitzvahs de'eraisa. So when Yid comes into the Rebbe, he says, I have a problem with my brain. So the Rebbe tells him, your brain is an Ever Kloli. It's a general organ. So there's not a particular mitzvah that's connected to the brain because the mitzvahs are called Ramach Evenim. They're connected to Ramach Pikud and Inu, Ramach Even, 248 mitzvahs, the 248 limbs, the particular Evarim that are connected to the specific mitzvahs. The Inyan Klali of Mayach is not included in that cheshbon. So B'meila, the Rebbe says to this man, you need a tikkun, you need a refuah for your mayach, healing for your brain. So you cannot choose a typical mitzvah, because typical mitzvahs are going to be pratim, and they can only be machlim, they can only heal evarim pratim. And you have a chesaron and an ever klali. So you have to choose a general mitzvah. A general mitzvah means you have to choose a mitzvah which is not technically in the Ramach mitzvahs, but it's not being in the Ramach mitzvahs, not because it's less important, but because it's more important. And the Rebbe gave him the mitzvah of hashgacha pratis. Now there's no such mitzvah as hashgacha pratis, right? There's no such mitzvah Emuna. What the Rebbe is saying is you should be bahadir in seeing hashgacha pratis. Make it your business to notice hashgacha pratis as much as you can. And that's you strengthening yourself in a mitzvah klalis, which will help heal the Ever Klali, which is the Meach. That's what the Rebbe's answer to this man was. That's the concept of mitzvah klalis. And as I explained it many times before, the Misnagdim said that tefillah, for example, is not that important because it's the Rabbanon, and the Alter Rebbe screams, tefillah may be, according to the media, the Rabbanon, and not because it's not important, but because it's super important. It's the mitzvah klalis of Aveda Shabalev, of connecting to the Eibishter, which is the basis for all of the Tayak mitzvahs, all the Ramach mitzvahs Hazeh. So in this Mamer, the Rebbe is going to say that Emuna is a mitzvah klalis, and Machzah Shekel is a mitzvah klalis, because Machzah Shekel is Kefer Nafshi, and Karbonos are in Yanim Kloliyim. Even though Karbonos are also mitzvahs pratias, there's in Yanim Kloliyim in Karbonos, there's in Yanim Kloliyim in Machzah Shekel, and there's Yanim Kloliyim in, I guess, in Tefillah, which is parallel to Karbonos. And there's certain Inyan Kloliyim in Emuna. So Machzah HaShekel is going to be the Ure'eya Emuna for Emuna, because Emuna is an Inyan Kloli, and Machzah Shekel Kefer Nafshi is an Inyan Kloli, and it's going to be specifically a internalizing of Emuna on the higher Madrega, and the Madrega of Moshe Rabbeinu. This is my introduction to this Mamer, which has taken 20 minutes, more or less. Number one, what does Emuna mean? Emuna means a connection to Hashem which is beyond reason. Even if you come to Hashem through reason, at some point you put the brain down and you leap. You say, I want a relationship with the Eibishter, and I stop questioning, I stop having to constantly remind myself of how I understand that there's Yesh Balabayas Labi Razu. I know there's an Eibishter, and I want to have a relationship with him, and that's my focus. That's what Emuna means. And in Emuna, there's going to be, in this Mamer, only 2 Madregas. But on the Mamer of Yud Aleph, there's going to be 3. The Madrega of a Goy, which is in Mimalei Kalalmin, the Madrega of a Yid, which is in Sovev Kalalmin, and the Madrega of Aminim Bnei Maminim, which in this Mamer is going to be the Emuna that comes from Moshe Rabbeinu, which is higher than Sovev Kalalmin. And in each case, the Emuna needs his chaskos. The Emuna needs internalization. The Emuna needs to be shepherded. The Emuna. And the chaskos for the Emuna, the shepherding of the Emuna, comes from Hisbonenus in the case of the Emunah of Avraham Avinu. It comes from Machzah Shekel in the case of the Emunah of Moshe Rabbeinu. Now, Rabbi say, I looked in the Ayin Tes just for a minute, Now, I didn't look long enough to see clearly, but the Rebbe Rashab is also speaking similar in Yonim that the Rebbe speaks here. And I don't know that Mamer well enough to know if the Rebbe is simply repeating the Rebbe Rashab's words or the Rebbe is adding a clarity to it in terms of the way the Mamer breaks down that there's Avraham Avinu's Emuna, which is strengthened by Hisbonenus, and Moshe Rabbeinu's Emuna, which is strengthened by Machzah Shekel. I don't know. But one thing is for sure, the difference in Avraham Avinu's Emuna is Emuna based on the Eibishter as the creator, and Moshe Rabbeinu's Emuna is based on the fact that the Eibishter gave us the data. So we're going to start learning the Mamer inside, but of course, Chas v'Shalom, we should learn in order. That would make me unnecessary, redundant. So go to page 97, middle paragraph, the fourth line, where it says, Uklalus habir bazehu. And I want you to see how the Rebbe develops the two types of Emuna, the Emuna of Avraham Avinu and the Emuna of Moshe Rabbeinu, and then you'll see how it ties into Kisisa. And the Rebbe begins the clause habir bazeh. The explanation in general is as follows: Hine Mashi Yisrael. Hey, we know about the Jewish people that they are Ma'aminim b'nei Ma'aminim, and the first Ma'aminim is in parenthesis. Believers, descendants of believers. And of course, the way the Maimorim go, a goy has Emuna because he has proof of Seichel. But even a goy is Emuna, which is because he has proof of Seichel. He doesn't stay with the Seichel, he leaps past the Seichel. Because the Seichel alone is not Emuna, it's just a Heichacham. It's just the idea. He knows there's an Eibishter. But Emuna means that I know the Eibishter and I therefore want a relationship with him, which is true even Lahafdul by a goy based on his understanding. By a Yid, the Emuna comes from the Neshama. We inherited it. Ma'aminim in the Neshama. And then of course in the Neshama itself there's the two levels of Ma'aminim, believers because of the Neshama, and Ma'aminim b'nei Ma'aminim, believers, the descendants of believers, which is because of Avraham Avinu. And in this Mamer, if I understand it correctly, Ma'aminim is going to be because of Avraham Avinu, and Ma'aminim b'nei Ma'aminim is going to be because of Moshe Rabbeinu. But of course, Adayin Tzarachi and Gadol. But in each case, there's 2 points. There's 3 points. There's the idea that I know, I understand. There is the leap past the idea, away from the idea, to the connection, to the relationship. The relationship with the Havah, the Eibishter, based on Mah, Neshama, Malas Aguf, Kahal Kadosh Baruch Hu, Malas Elam, and then the relationship of the Eibishter is Mehaveh V'chayim Akayim, the world B'chol Rega V'rega, and the relationship with the Eibishter as he is removed from the creation altogether. And in each of these, there's the Urei Emunah, the Emunah is strengthened. And the Mamer that we have in front of us does not talk about the Emunah of a Goy. It talks only about the Emunah of Moshe, Avraham Avinu, the Emunah of Moshe Rabbeinu. Let's read it inside. Derimashi Yisrael Imamin, Ibn Jewish Emunah is mitzad Yerush, Ameha Avos, that we inherited from the Avos. In other words, we have Emunah in our Neshama. That Avraham is Reish Amona, is the first believer. And the Chazal translates the word Reish Amona as Reish L'Ma'amin, in the first believer. It says in the Pasuk, Vehemen B'dei Shem. Avraham Avinu trusted the Eibishter. He believed in the Eibishter. The Eibishter promised him that he's going to give him Bris HaZerah. And he believed him. And the Eibishter said to him, I'm giving you the Bris HaOretz. And Avraham Avinu said, B'mo Eida Ki Roshena. So Rashi wonders, does that mean Avraham Avinu had a seifik in the Eibishter's Emunah, in the Nitzchias of Eretz Yisrael? And Rashi says, amongst other pshatim, that he went by Beis Chus. But the Bris HaZerah, the children, thousands of years after Avraham Avinu would call themselves B'nei Avraham, as we are, Avraham Avinu believed without any questioning. Didn't say B'mo Eida. So the Pasuk says, V'hemen B'Hashem. He believed him. V'achshvel is considered for Avraham Avinu a big schus. So the Rebbe says, we inherited this Emunah from Avraham Avinu. So Avraham Avinu was a Maimon. But of course, the way you learn Chassidus, Avraham was a Maimon because of his Seichel. Like the Rebbe says in the Sichos, the why does the Rambam say that Avraham Avinu was 40 years old when he came to his conclusions about Elokus? Because the Rambam wants to emphasize the idea Ben Abayim Labina, that Avraham was at the age of 40, which is the age of understanding, because he came to the Eibishter through his Seichel. And then he leaped past his Seichel to be a Maimon. And by a Yid, it's B'nei Ma'aminim, it's in our genes. We inherit it from Avraham Avinu. Says the Rebbe Aval, however. There's another Emunah. And the higher Emuna is connected to Moshe Rabbeinu, who's called the Raya Mehemna, a shepherd of faith. Shuhureya Mefanes v'chulu kanal Emuna zu. He shepherds this faith. But the way you learn it in this Mamer, his shepherding this faith is not simply fortifying the faith of Avraham Avinu, but giving us a different dimension of faith. You see, Emuna is having a relationship with the Eibishter. And you know, there's basically two kinds of relationships. I can have a relationship with the Eibishter because I like me. And I like the Eibish because the Eibishter does things for me. And then you can have a relationship with the Eibishter because the Eibishter is emes and I want emes. It's a much higher Emuna. In this Mamer, the two Emunas are the Emuna of Avraham Avinu. Avraham Avinu had a relationship with the Eibishter, and we inherit that relationship. So Emuna doesn't mean an understanding of Hashem or a proof of Hashem, it's the relationship with the Eibishter. But which Eibishter? So our Maimon is going to say it's the Eibishter which is connected to the world. Mimalei and Sovev. In other words, the relationship with the Eibishter that Avraham Avinu has. And the relationship with the Eibish which we have because of the Emuna, the behalf of Avraham Avinu, is related to Hashem, and as much as Hashem is involved in the world, not just as He gives us life, but He gives us existence. Yesh me'ayim b'chol rega v'rega. And the Emuna we have from Moshe Rabbeinu, which is connected to Torah, is the Eibish that has nothing to do with the creation. The Eibish is by Himself. In Torah we have a koyach to have a relationship with the Eibish by Himself, and to have Emuna on that madrege, and that's the Yisrael of Moshe's Emuna. So the Emuna doesn't mean, like it normally means, that Moshe is shepherding and strengthening the Emuna we have from Avraham Avinu, but He's giving us a higher type of Emuna as well. And he explains, the Yonei, the Moshe, Unyan HaTorah, the idea of Moshe's Torah. Like it says in the Pasuk, Zichra Moshe Torah Avdi, and it says in the Rambam, Shenekra Asal Shmei Lefisha Masan Afshal. In footnote 20, I'm saying to the Shmei's Rabbah, that the Torah is called Moshe Rabbeinu's, even though it's the Eibishter's, because it was Moshe Nafashvit, and it has brought the Rambam as well. So the Rebbe says, "V'hainu," what this means. The Emuna zu, he means an inyan Torah. For Moshe Rabbeinu, you have a different Emuna, and the Emuna you have Moshe Rabbeinu from the Torah. Now, what's the problem? What's the kasha? Torah is Chachmasei Uretzeinei Shel HaKadosh Baruch Hu. The holy of Torah is Chachma. Like the Gemara says, Torah Hi v'Lilman Anid Tzarech. The holy of Torah is to learn and understand. So where is there Emuna in Torah? And the answer is there's Emuna in the Neisen HaTorah. In other words, the Emuna of Torah is, for lack of words, and God should forgive me for speaking in a way which may sound unedel. Which God are you worshipping when you're learning and Torah and doing mitzvahs? Not the God who created the world, the God who's way beyond what the world is. And through the Torah, we not only understand the Chochmah that the Eibishter gave us, we develop a relationship with that Eibishter, where the Eibishter is completely removed from the world, which is hard in the Madrega of Mimalei Kalaman and hard in the Madrega of Sovev Kalaman. And he explained, Emuna, Shebirush Me'avis, the Emuna who have from the Avis, is Kemei Shehi, Lifnei Inyan Matan Torah. It's Emuna without the Torah. And when you have Emuna without the Torah, what do you have? You have your own mind. Your mind looks at the world, and the mind says there has to be klum, yesh le manig. Is it possible that this world exists without a governor, without a creator, without an organizer? And hitzatzalah ba'al abira, you discover that there has to be an Eibishter. And this itself is on two levels. On the level of Mimalei and the Eibishter is the organizer of the matter of the world, and the provider of life for the matter and the organization of the world. But we don't speak of yesh me'ayin, of a creator. And the Emuna and Sovev Kalaman is that you look at the world and you see not only does somebody create order and life in this world, but He created the material, the matter, the chaymer, the creation. Once there was not only now world, there wasn't even the material of the world, the matter of the world. And that comes from Sovev Kalaman. So the Hisbonenus and the Eibishter before the Torah is because of the world. And the Hisbonenus and the Eibishter from the world before Matan Torah, it consists of these two madregas, where you see how the Eibishter is giving life to the world and order to the world. Mimalei and Eibishter is giving creation. He's creating a yesh me'ayin. And before Matan Torah, Yid could use his shekel to come to know Hashem on the madregas of Mimalei and Sovev Kalaman, and even come to develop a relationship with the Eibishter, which is called Emuna on the madregas of Mimalei and Sovev Kalaman. There was a Torah before Matan Torah, but you cannot compare the Torah as we had it before. So Torah would have to look at the Sichas. The Rebbe says in the Sicha about the Fuas Hashas. The Rebbe says that Before Matan Torah, the Torah was only Seichel. After Matan Torah, the very same Torah becomes Anoichi. The Eibishter puts his Atzmus into the Torah. So if before Matan Torah, the Torah is only Seichel, it only gives you the Eibishter and a Madrega that have a Shaykhs to Seichel. But here he uses a different signal. Before Hashem gave it, it was a divide al yein, nim la yein, the tachtenim, what's above shouldn't come below, and tachtenim, the ala yein, what's below should not go up. And l'chayda, this means that the alakus, which is beyond what the world is, cannot be known in the world. You can't understand it, you can't prove it, and you certainly can't believe in it. So l'chayda, what the Rebbe says in that Sicha in Chelik Chav Gimel, I think it's on page 23, the beginning of the Sicha. And what the Rebbe says here are very similar. In that Sicha, the Rebbe said before Matan Torah they had a Torah, but it was only Chochmah. And after Matan Torah there's a Nechi. Here he says before Matan Torah there was a Gzeda. And the Gzeda says that what the Eibishter is, it's called Elyon, that means removed from the world, is not in the world. So you could know the Eibishter. Well, you could have a relation with the Eibishter that's strong, but it's only the Eibishter of the world, the Eibishter of Tachtenim, which is Mimalei and Sovev. And you can have Emuna, a relationship with the Eibishter on those two levels, but not higher. After Matan Torah there's Bitla Greda. Now you can have a relationship with the Eibishter, which is called Atzmus. Hashem as he is by himself. Mashiach came, B'shas gave us the Torah information. Hayabit la Gzeda, the Eibishter broke the divide. What was above came below. Like it is in the Pasuk, so now in this world, there's the capacity to know Hashem that has nothing to do with the creation, not directly with Malakalam. And not indirectly. Sovev Kalam, with the Eibishter is called Atzmus, as he is by himself. And not only you could know it, but you could believe it. You have a relationship with it. Now, how do you know it? How do you know it? What's the proof? You don't see him in the world, and the only answer is you know it because you see him in the Torah. So the shaila becomes, where do you see in the Torah on the level of Igoy and on the level of Seichel the Anechi? The Eibishter is by himself, and I'm not sure about that. But this is sure, that because Hashem gave us the Torah, and we're capable of a relationship with the Eibishter on the Anechi level, we're also capable of having Emuna. It means a connection to him based on that Anechi. This is the pshat masha kol ho'avedis shasu ha'avis, whatever the obvious the afilu elu shebefanachi, now the highest, which includes the inam mesiras nefesh, he yirak l'shelish and Avraham. They could not reach higher than the source of the creation. And reach the source of the creation kabbalistically is beginning of Elam Abriya. But the Eibishter that you can know from the source of creation is the Eibishter that's close to the creation, the madrigas of Malak Alaman and Sovev Kalaman, and not higher. It's also a very high level. It only gets to the source of the Nevrayim and not higher. Mashiach came inside Matan Torah when the Eibishter gave us the Torah. Oh, so Hayabit like Zed when the Eibishter gave us there was no vacation of a decree. And al Yenim Yed Lamata, what was on high came low, meaning when the Eibishter gave us the Torah, a lakus, which is not at all connected to the world, neither directly nor indirectly, was brought into the world through the Torah. And we could know this, and we have a connection, Emuna, connection to the Eibishter of that Madreg. And al Yenim Yed Lamata of a Yed Hashem al Har Sinai. Moving as a result of this, Hashem gave us Torah, everything was limited. Not just the world was limited, not just was our ability to understand the Eibishter limited, but our ability to have a relationship. Emuna the Eibishter was also limited. Mashiach came inside Matan Torah, they gave us a Torah, everything has no limit whatsoever, which is the Chiddush of Matan Torah, both in terms of what the Torah is, both in terms of the effect of the mitzvahs that we do, as well as in terms of the relationship we have with the Eibishter. Vehu, and the difference is, al derech hamavur b'drushe v'yadayta. There's several maimarim v'yadayta in Vayeschanan, in Likutei Torah, and in those maimarim it says like this: Shemashayim u'be'efin demuna, levels that now, before Mashiach comes, we only believe in, meaning we can have connections to things which are above reason, but we can't internalize them and understand them. When Mashiach comes, we're not going to understand those levels of Elikus. Now as Mashiach comes, we're going to have a higher Emuna. We're going to have an Emuna still, which will be even higher. Just like you learn in Chassidus. You know, the Lashon is Emuna Yedi Emuna, right? That's how they teach the Mamer Hamanas Elikus. That's how you learn the second Hadrin, the Hadrin from Tov Shin Memvov, which the Rebbe said, Take Shabbos Chov Vova Derishin. Tov Shin Memvov, Erev Chazayin Aderishin, we started the second cycle of Rambam. And yesterday was Chazayin Aderishin, 38 years ago. And that Hadran, the Rebbe talks about the Emuna which comes before Seichel, and the Emuna which comes after Seichel. Vaket, over there he speaks the Maila of the Emuna which comes before Seichel, or the Emuna which comes after Seichel. But here he explains that the Emuna, which is higher than the Seichel of the Asid Lavi, is even higher than that Seichel. Va'after Shtein, even though both of them, Emuna the Yachshav, Emuna the Yossi, what we are able to believe now, and we're able to believe Yossi, the Bechinas Emuna, they're both in Yanam from Emuna. Nevertheless, Emuna the Achshav, the Emuna we have now is Bedarga Shayech, as La'elam is in a level which is close to the worlds. Well, the Asid the Mashiach comes now, what happens, Tiyadarga Zuba Bechinas Yadir. What we now believe we're going to know intellectually, but by knowing it intellectually will be very clear and very obvious to us, but it's not necessarily going to elicit a relationship, and this is still a tzarechiyun, v'az tiyemuna b'darga she'eni be'erach elam is cloud, then the Emunah is going to be even higher. What madregi b'b'chin on that level of leis, machshav, Tisa, be turn to page 9, the level of alakus which nobody can hold, we're going to have Emunah less love, which is afilu machshava gdum da'ak, which is still considered machshava. And the Emunah we're going to have is going to be even higher than Machshava. So we're going to have Emunah in the highest Madregas. Now, how am I teaching it to you? I'm teaching it to you that first you know, then you believe. The Mamer is saying, first you reach the edge of your knowledge, and then you believe what's beyond. It's not the same thing. The Mamer is saying a little bit different than what I'm saying. Because the Mamer is trying to describe that you begin Emuna when you run out of Yediyah. What I'm trying to say is this idea of Ganva Pu Machtata Rachamana Karya, which you're going to see later, that you can believe in the Eibishter and have a problem doing what he says, and you need to internalize that faith and make it personal, means that understanding the Shem intellectually is not enough. You have to go away from the intellect and become a believer, and then in what you believe you need to internalize. That's how I'm teaching it. So I guess you could say that both are true. Number one, you believe ideas which are beyond what you're able to understand. And number two is this, that you believe you internalize through the process of the Emuna. And that's what Emuna means. I don't just have proof of the Eibishter, I have a personal relationship with the Eibishter. And I'm not sure still. In other words, maybe I'm making a mistake. Maybe I'm reading too much into the Mamer. But that's how I'm teaching it to you. That Emuna means I don't just understand, I go away from the sign to have a connection with. And our Mamer would add, and what you have a connection with is going to be more than you understand. And then this that you went away from your understanding to have a relationship with, and a level of Emuna needs to be internalized with a Emuna. Just like we explained the idea, that you can understand something intellectually, and what's beyond that you believe. And then later, what you believe today, tomorrow you understand, then you believe even higher until you understand that most you could possibly understand, and you believe only in those in Yom which are impossible to understand. These differences are the difference between the Emuna and Avraham and Mamer. Avraham gives us Emuna, but the Avraham that Avraham gives us still has the shaychus to Seichel. Maybe I don't understand it, but somebody else can. But Moshe's Emuna, no one can understand ever. The mitzad Avraham, the Emuna of Avraham Avinu, Av shehi Emuna. It's also Emuna. It's also a relationship. But it's madregas of Mimalei Kalam, the save of Kalam. Notice how the Mimalei Kalam is there a bracket because that's the Davar HaPoshet. And again, in other Maimorim they talked about the Emuna of Goyim. Here the Rebbe doesn't mention it because they nevertheless who bechinas hamakim save Allah elamis. They have a madrega of Emuna in Mimalei and even in Sovev. In other words, what I understand about the Eibush that when I come to develop a relationship with and believe in is a lakus which are the shaychus to elamis. Is godliness which is involved in worldliness. In other words, my relationship with the Eibush is based on what the Eibush allows me to see of him because of what he gives me. Moshe, as opposed to Moshe Rabbeinu, he adds a new dimension to the Emuna, which is called Mezenis and Parnasa. And again, in other Maimorim, all Moshe is doing is taking the Emuna we have from Avraham Avinu and making it personal. Here the Rebbe is saying he's not just taking the Emuna we have from Avraham Avinu and making it personal, but he's giving us a higher Emuna. And what's that higher Emuna? It's mamshich b'neshama Yisrael b'china shalom alam ha'elamis. He brings the Yidna relationship with, an understanding of, and a connection with Alakus, which is above Elamis, which is Aneich Avaya Lekecha, the Madrega of Aneich, which is higher than Avaya and higher than Lekecha. Sheti Emuna gam b'chinas the Madregas of godliness, which do not show themselves in the world at all. We have a relationship with. It's like the Yid who's connected to Atzmus. The Alter Rebbe said Dechvil Manishas Dichalein Atzmus, which you don't see evidence of in the world at all. That's the emes, the Avraham of Alter Rebbe wanted, and that's the inyan of Emuna on the Madrega of Moshe Rabbeinu. Sheti Emuna gam b'chinas on the Madrega of Atzmus, which is above the world altogether. We should have Emuna. The underlying issue is that Avraham Avinu gives us Emuna in the Eibishter. But the Eibishter we know from the world directly or indirectly. Moshe Rabbeinu gives us Emuna of the Eibishter. But the Eibishter which is in the Torah, which is Atzmus Mamish, which is a higher kind of Emuna. And of course, this is consistent with the Rambam. But the Rambam speaks about it in matters of halacha, but now we're going to apply it to Emuna as well. But the Rambam speaks about this Mila. And he says, we don't do a bris because Avraham Avinu did a bris. Even though it's called in the Nusach HaBracha Lach Nise Bevrisei Shal Avraham Avinu, and the Rebbe has a sikha on it. But rather because Hashem told us through Moshe Rabbeinu, we should do a bris. And this is a klal in Rambam in Lamedim Lifnei Matan Torah. The reason is if we did the same bris of Avraham Avinu, we'd be relating to the Eibishter, as the Eibishter has connections to the world. But we do bris milah because of Moshe Rabbeinu, which is the Eibishter, which is higher up in the world completely. The levels of godliness which are connected to the world directly or indirectly, even the levels that are called the source for the world, they're still imcha. They're only tafel lagabe the Eibishter, tafel batal leslach. In other words, and the level of godness, which has any connection to the worldliness directly, indirectly, is connected to the idea and the Emunah of Avraham Avinu, and therefore the kiyum and mitzvahs of Avraham Avinu. Or b'inyan ha-Torah, when Hashem gives us the Torah, it's leirak b'chinas ha-Torah k'meish b'chinas nevis, chachma shamayla lo, Torah comes out from chachma in the way of nevis, which is nevis b'vad, but there's a shadish of Torah which is higher than chachma altogether. The idea of this is another conversation. That the way Seichel Torah comes to us is connected to Neva's Chachma. Like this, gives the Kiddush, that's why Moshe Rabbeinu gives us the Torah, because he's the Madrega of Chachma. But the Shadish Torah is much, much higher, Nanechi. And the Eibishter who gave us the Torah, gave us the Emuna in him, higher than the idea of Avraham Avinu and the Emuna in the Eibishter which Avraham Avinu had from his Avon of Asag. So now that we learned the introduction to the Mamer, which is the middle of the Mamer, that presented us with the two levels, the Emuna of Avraham and the Emuna of Moshe, which is different than how it is in most Maimorim, where Moshe is Machazik, Avraham's Emuna, and here it's Gora Nander Emuna. No, but Avraham gives us a connection to the Eibishter, not just an understanding, a connection. And Moshe doesn't give us a deeper appreciation for the connection of Avraham. He gives us a new connection, a connection what we're calling Atzmus, Alakus, which has nothing to do with the world. Now we can learn the Mamer. And the chap of this Mamer is Kitisas Roish. Roish means Seichel. Roish means Hisbonenus. And Kitisas Roish means you have to go back past the chizuk of Emuna from Avraham Avinu to the chizuk of Emuna of Moshe Rabbeinu. That's how this Mamer is framed. So page 95, number 6. The Pasuk says, Ketishas Reish B'nei Yisrael, when you're going to count the Jewish people, and of course it says the word Reish, you count them by their heads, Lifkodeim to their numbers, so they don't count heads. So Rashi says, there should be Chatashal Mamagefel, Tia Negev, Benos, Noish Keish, Nafshe, V'Game, they should all give a Machzah Shekel as redemption of their soul. And of course the famous question is, how could Machzah Shekel be a Keif and Nafshe? How could a half shekel be a redemption of a person's soul? So one of the many answers that's brought is Kimin Madbei Shalesh. If the Machzah Shekel that you give is fire, then a Machzah Shekel is a Kefer Nafshe. And although this doesn't say in this Maimah, L'chera, that's going to be the Avon of this Maimah. So the Rebbe begins by asking questions. V'hinei Mashakal of Tisa Kipshute. When it says you should lift up Shmamino Koyal Meish, it goes on Meish Rabbein. Because first of all, Medaber B'Loshen Neichach is speaking directly when you will lift up. And number two, B'Loshen Yochid in singular, V'lei B'Loshen Rabbein Meistam. It doesn't say in Loshen Rabbein we're stam. So obviously Hashem is telling Moshe Rabbeinu, it's on Moshe Rabbeinu to lift up, to count the Jewish people. Tzarech Lavan Ta'amadig, the Dafka Moshe, why Dafka Moshe Rabbeinu has to count the Jewish people. And it continues, V'hinei me'adgosh, as HaKosov Ketis Loshen Neichach Dafka Moshe. Yisas Eish B'nei Yisrael, once we realize that the Pesukim are suggesting that Dafka Moshe Rabbeinu has to count the Jewish people, Muchach Mizeh, this proves, this indicates, Yesh Nesalka, that there would be a possibility, Shezeh Yochalias Adi Achat, somebody else could count Jews besides for Moshe Rabbeinu. The question is, since there's a possibility, somebody else could also count Yidden. If anybody could count Yidden, why does it have to be Moshe? If anybody could count Yidden, why does it have to be Moshe Dafke? The third question is, that's really the question this Mamer is going to be distinct about, is the Suas Reish. You have to raise up the heads. Stop. If it would say to lift up the Jewish people, there will be enough, because in the word Tisa you would have both ideas. If you take the word Reish out, you would already have, first of all, Pirush HaKosav Lashon Kabbalah. Pirush Rashi, Lakabas Chum and Yom Tisa means to receive, to collect the number of Jews. V'chein Pirush Nesiyas V'harama, the idea of lifting up. So in the word Kitisa, you have both the word, you will collect numbers and you will lift up, without the word Reish. V'lama, Emer, Kitisa as Reish. Why do you have to say Kitisa as Reish? And I told you already, the answer is going to be, Kitisa as Reish means that Avraham gives us Emuna. And the internalization of Avraham Avinu's faith is from Hisbonenus. And Kitisa as Reish, you have to raise the Jewish people above, not just the Emuna of Avraham Avinu, but above the Roish, the Hisbonenus, which brings the Emunah of Avraham Avinu into Pnimis. You have to see that also to reach the Emunah of Moshe Rabbeinu. That the chizuk of the Emunah of Moshe Rabbeinu doesn't come from Roish, from Hisbonenus, but the chizuk of the Emunah of Moshe Rabbeinu is going to come from Machtas HaShekal. The question is finally, why do you give half a shekel? And of course the question is, the Pasuk came at Esem Gera Shekel, that a shekel has 20 Gera, and you have to give only Eser. So what would have happened if it would say to give Eser Gera? Why does it have to say that a shekel is Esrim, and you give a Machtas HaShekel? All of these questions are going to be asked. Now the last question, the Rebbe is going to answer in a very typical way. Is this that the neshama has 20 and you have, it's really 10. Is this whatever? There's not going to be an arichas amachza shekel. In this Mamer, the two key ideas, the Rebbe just raised 5 questions, right? Why Moshe? And especially if somebody else could do it, why does it have to be Dafke Moshe? Why Roish? Why do you call it Machtas HaShekel? Especially since the Torah specifies that a shekel is esrim and half a shekel is eser, why doesn't it simply say eser? Of these 5 questions, the two that are going to dominate this Mamer is why Moshe Rabbeinu and why Reish. And the Rebbe continues and he says, V'yuvan, the answer to all of these questions is behegdom. Let's preface first. Mashin yon isha machza shekel, who the concept of machza shekel is, which of the Pasuk says, lias kefen nafshi, to redeem the soul. You're giving half a shekel to redeem your soul. Now redeeming your soul is not stam azoi, right? We have a relationship with the Eibishter. And as Yidden, our relationship with the Eibishter consists of kiyama mitzvahs. We learn Torah, we do mitzvahs. There's many, many aspects to our involvement with Hashem. Kaifa Nafshe speaks about our soul, about our nefesh, about a basic self-definition, and how we're redeeming the entirety of nefesh. It's a very powerful statement, Kaifa Nafshe. The Mizem move on the language of Kaifa Nafshe denotes shahu that Machza Shekel's Indian kloli. Machza Shekel must be something very, very large. Shapel Kaifa Nafshe, it could be a kapara for the whole neshama. So the language that Machza Shekel is Kaifa Nafshe qualifies Machza Shekel as something very, very special. To call anything the redemption of the soul is a big deal. It's an Indian kloli, as you're going to see momentarily. Now, I told you about this in my introduction to the whole Mamer, that it's a mitzvah kloli, it's an Indian kloli. In other words, there are things in Yiddishkeit that are connected to one part of our guf and one part of our relationship with the Eibishter. And then there are things in Yiddishkeit which encompass all of it. And calling Machza Shekel Kaifa Nafshe, which makes Machza Shekel an Indian kloli, makes it one of those encompassing things. As the Rebbe is going to say momentarily, it's connected to Emuna. Parshas as it actually actualized. This money was given to the community to belong to everybody, right? The famous order from the Rebbe in the Tzadik Dalet, Tafshin Aleph, that the Machza Shekel is completely the community's. There's no proteistic aspect to it, and yet we say al teifen and chosam, that somehow, even though Meitzis Yafa, somehow there's a prat of yichidus in the machzah shekel. Okay, if you know what I'm talking about, don't worry about it. But machzah shekel becomes community money. And every single point of the machzah shekel belongs to every single Jew. So you're taking something from your own personal wealth, you're giving it to Lakus, giving it to the Eibush in a kind of way that it, and therefore you, become part of the klal. To buy communal offerings that every Jew has a portion in, b'shul karbanos kol hashorif, for the karbanos of the entire year. So the Rebbe says the idea of karban tzibur, which is brought by each day by every single Jew, is an inyan klali, which is consistent with the idea of klal of kefer nafshe. The idea that you're giving a half a shekel and it's redeeming your whole soul, it's an inyan klali. It's through a general idea. So let's think of it this way. I'm giving a half a shekel, which is not a lot of money. And again, I don't know how this Mamer is going to end. I learned this Mamer this week in Shul. So Chava came into Mincha, and I said to one of the younger light, was Halta Bissa Balenin, I repeated him the Teichen of this Mamer. So he said to me right away, but the Rebbe doesn't say what to do. Right? The Ischaskas of Emuna of Moshe Rabbeinu is the Machzah Shekel. So what am I supposed to do? The Mamer doesn't say. The only hasbara that I could give, I mean, in a lot of the Maimarim and Machzah Shekel, they talk about the idea that it's not complete with another Yid, not complete without the Eibishter, and so on. But one of the explanations, the Matbeya Shalesh, that the Machzah Shekel is fire. But you take a few cents, you give it to the community, it becomes everybody's, and it becomes part of something which is an inyan from Klau. But it begins with me giving a half shekel. But my giving a half shekel is not a big deal. So the Rebbe says it is. And the big deal from the individual person's end, giving the machzah shekel in a way that it's meisel tzibur yafa yafa, becomes the whole community, used for the karbanos tzibur, is that when I give that half shekel, it's saying for Emuna. Ve'inyan klali ba'adem hu inyan hu Emuna. You see, that's what he says, v'hu ayadei davar klali, v'hine inyan klali ba'adem hu inyan hu Emuna. The klal idea within the individual person, which gives the machzah shekel such a potency that it can become a part of the klal idea of karbanos tzibur and be effective for this individual in a klal way, called kofer nafshe, is Emuna. Because he in klali, because Emuna is a general idea with each individual person, and the source of the gift of the chatzi shekel is Emuna, and therefore the power of the giving of machzah shekel is kofer nafshe for karbanos tzibur. Because Emuna is lamaylo me'eschalkos, it's above subdivision, as makif, as kol, and yoni ha'adam, embraces all aspects of a person. If a person gives it correctly, as gam mashpas u'pe'eled b'chol protekechas adam, if a person has Emuna the way he's supposed to, so first of all, it's above the specifics of the person. And if it's done properly, it pervades all the details of a person. Every aspect of the person is filled with the power that comes from that Emuna. Just like we explained what happens to the machzah shekel, that it's an inyan klali, it's moment, see, it's collective money. That we take from this karbanos hakalashana, karbanos for all year, which is ordinary, including yomim miyuchadim and zmanim miyuchadim, special days and special times. For example, the Talmud is b'chol yom, that's regular. Or b'chol yom guf b'zmanim miyuchadim bekeverev, in each day in specific times, morning and night. I'm not sure what that means with these details. In addition to the fact that there's special days, the same is true. The Emuna of a Yid, if it's the way it's supposed to be, pervades every aspect of the Yid's life, the ordinary and the extraordinary. The same is true of a Jew's faith, which is in klali apel by pratim gabkit. Every detail of a person is pervaded with Emuna. No, if my Emuna is unhealthy, I believe in the Eibishter, and that's it. If my Emuna is healthy, every aspect of my life, the klolim and the pratim, the big things and the little things, are pervaded with Emuna. So just like machzah shekel is an inyan klali, because it's for karbonis that are inyanim klaliyim, and it affects kefer nafshi, which is an inyan klali, so is Emuna. But apparently there's two machzah shekels, right? There's two karbonis tzibur, there's two kefer nafshis. Just like there's two Emunas. There's Emuna stam, and there's Emuna which has been cultivated. Emuna has been developed. And that's where he says, Vihine. Emuna kfua etzel kol echad ve'echad Yisrael b'teva te'elosi. Emuna is fixed in the nature of a yid. Now, nature is a big mile, right? As I've told you in a previous class I gave, one of my modern we learned that there's two uses of the word teva. Teva of the nefesh habahamis and teva of the nefesh halakis. And when it says over here teva, it doesn't mean the teva of the nefesh habahamis, it means the teva of the nefesh halakis and kol dover. Teva zeh shema mushal l'chol dover she'eni bebechinas tam v'das, it's above seichel. The Yisrael him aminim b'nim aminim. But of course, nevertheless, there is still the issue of Emuna being makif. V'havoidi, the job of a person is that Emuna, you have to shepherd the faith. Achetifol b'chol ani ha'adam. A person should not just believe, but it should permeate the person as gechesav. You know, the Rabbi Emmanuel Shochet alav Shalom Zachen Lebracha used to speak about a cardiac Jew. You have a Yid only in the heart, and they have all the pressure of Yiddishkeit on your heart. It's a rachmanis of nuts. Your heart can't handle it. It has to be a rucha b'chol ramach evidim, has to radiate to the whole person. And when the Emuna radiates to the whole person, this is not b'chol avacha, this is b'chol nafshecha. The whole person is filled with Emuna, meaning I believe in the Eibishter on the level that I do what the Eibishter says. And that's also a part of Machzas HaShekel. The etzem inyan of Machzas HaShekel is connected to Emuna. And the avoid of Machzas HaShekel is about internalizing the Emuna. Dehine, everything is divided up into 10. And in footnote 6 is I'd love to look that up, but I didn't. And the examples are said as a dibris, that api teda, everything in the creation, and not just in the creation, everything in the teda, which is the source of the creation, goes into number 10. The phenomena of division breaks down into a complete number 10. It's this way in the Esses Sfiris, and this is why it's this way in the world. And of course, the Rebbe spoke many times that the idea of Esser v'leitesha, Esser v'leachadasa is kachal machshov. The Eibishter wanted it to be 11 or 9, it would have been that. But the way the Eibishter made the world, that everything in Torah goes into number 10, and therefore automatically everything in the world goes into number 10 as well, including the person. And therefore the Machzas HaShekel is giving an inyan which is connected to Emuna that needs to pervade the entire person, all 10 faculties of the person. Now there's two ways to explain this, I think. There's two ways to explain what the gift of Machzas HaShekel is, and why Machzas HaShekel is enough for Kefer Nafshe. Right? The classic question, I give 50 cents to the Eibishter, and it's Kefer Nafshe. So I mentioned this before. One answer is Kimin Matbei Shalesh. You're giving 50 cents of fire. And if you think about it, there's a zeyavite from Poshet. What does it mean to give the Eibishter fire? Fire means Avas Hashem. Fire means Mesiras Nefesh. Fire means I may be giving a small amount of kamos, but that kamos represents an infinity. Alternatively, the idea of Machzas HaShekel is the recognition that I need another half. And that other half could be, number one, another Jew. Number two, my own makifim, right? I give machtas, and the other half is the teiches makifim, the chaya and yechida. And number three, it's the 10 koiches of the nefesh halakis and the 10 koiches of the nefesh habahamis. In all of those cases, the idea of Machzas HaShekel is the admission of dependency and the acknowledgement of the need to connect to my other half to become a whole. That's what makes the idea of Machzas HaShekel so potent, that it could be Kefer Nafshe, and it's considered an inyan klali. All of Yiddishkeit depends on the idea of Machzas HaShekel, either because it's fire, or because it's a half, and I recognize that I need to become whole. And in Avedas to Adam, it's Emuna. And the Emuna has these two dimensions. Number one, my connection to the Eibishter. Number two, that connection to Eibishter has to be internalized with me. And perhaps, the Emuna itself is one half a shekel, and bringing the Emuna to the Koiches HaNefesh is the other half a shekel. But the question about Esrim Geda and Eser Geda still stands. Right, one of the 5 questions was, why does the Pasuk say Esrim Geda Shekel, and you have to give Machzas Shekel, which is Eser? So this question is going to be answered now. V'hine, Isa b'Sefer HaBoy, it says in Kabbalah, and the Sefer HaBoy, look in footnote 7, is mitzayin to the Pardes. So it's a funny thing. I mean, the Sefer HaBoy exists. You could look up the Moker, Whenever the Rebbe is even Sefer Boris, Behuv B'Padas means the Sefer Rebbe is a bissel Shvedzig in it. But I don't know, I didn't look. Shabbos is Sfiras, Yeshem Shei Bechinas, 10 Sfiras have two parts. As a Sfiras Mamata Lamaila, as a Sfiras Mamaila Lamata. 10 Sfiras from the bottom up, and 10 Sfiras from the top down. But then the question becomes, if there's 10 Sfiras Mamata Lamaila, where the first Sfira is Malchus, and 10 says a Mailamat, where the first Sfira is Keser or Chochma, Im Kain had a Yeshna Mesim Sfiras, and there's 20, why do we say there's only 10? But this Manama came is missing. Who's asking and who's answering? Could be the Padis, but he's not mitzaying anything. The two aspects of Sfiras. When you're counting from the bottom up and the top down, they're really the same thing. Esam Sfiras, which is why they're Eser. They're really 10. Since the 10 Sfiras exist both in terms of how the Eibishter gives us koiches, and both in terms of how we connect to Him, therefore, in terms of life, there are 20 ideas. The 10 ideas of me connecting to Him and the 10 ideas of Him giving to me. But they're 10 because the two overlap completely. In other words, the 10 that He gives me and the 10 that I seek are the same. And that's the pshat, Esrim Gera Shekel, Ubakol Mokim Tzadach Lesses like Eser Gera. A complete shekel is 20. And you have to give Eser. And Eser is Machzis. So the Shaila was, right, what do you have to say? Esrim Gera Shekel Machza Shekel. Either say Machza Shekel or say Eser Gera. Why say Esrim Gera Shekel? And then get Eser Gera Machza Shekel, which is 10 Gera, say only Machatzis or only 10. Why do you point out that a whole shekel is 20 and you have to give half of it? So the answer is because the 10 is 20. That's what the pasuk is. Shekel is 20 Gera. Like I said, you give only 10. There's 20 ideas. But you give in 10 machzah shekel is Eser Gera. There's the 10 faculties. And what he's trying to say is, you give 10 and the Eibishter gives 10. And that's 20. And that's what makes machzah shekel a mitzvah close. What makes machzah shekel a mitzvah close is that you realize your dependency upon the Eibishter. So again, there's a lot of ways of explaining why a machzah shekel is significant. Number one, I'm connecting to another yid. Number two, I'm connecting to another part of my neshama. Number three, I'm connecting b'nefshel kis nefshel bahamis. And of course, the most important of all of these, and the foundation of all of these, is connecting myself with the Eibishter. So you give machzah shekel. The Eibishter gives the other machzah shekel. Together it's a shekel l'kodesh. It's esrim gera. But it's called eser because it's not 20. It's how the 10 exist by themselves and how the 10 are inspired by the Eibishter. So the Rebbe says it in these words: Hamshachas ha'amuna l'asakechas. Emuna is 110, and asakechas is another 10, and bringing the Emuna 10 into the asakechas makes 20, but it's not 20. Because you're bringing the Emuna into the 10 koiches, so it's 10 koiches filled with Emuna. So those are the two ideas of machzah shekel. The first idea of machzah shekel is the Emuna is by itself. The second idea of machzah shekel is how the machzah shekel pervades, how the Emuna pervades every aspect of my being. And when a yid has Emuna in the Eibishter, and he doesn't allow the Emuna to be makif, but he insists on internalizing the Emuna, it atones for the neshama. When a person believes in the Eibishter, and he affects that his Emuna should change who he is practically. And as a result, he's going to behaviorally live as the Eibishter wants, because Emuna has become one with it. It's Kefa Nafshe Ad Lachap and Nafshe Seichem, it atones for the Neshama. So in other words, Machtes HaShekel is the Urei Emuna. That's how it's going to play out. Machtes HaShekel itself is the Urei Emuna. Right? We all know two things, Emuna and the Urei Emuna. Faith and the internalization of faith. In this Mamer, as we just learned it, the Urei Emuna is through the Machtes HaShekel. Why? Because the Machtes HaShekel by itself is the Emuna, and the giving of the Machtes HaShekel is connecting the Emuna to the Eser Koiches HaNefesh, and therefore together it's Esrim, even though L'Poil it's only Eser, because the Emuna and the Eser Koiches become one and the same thing. This is L'Choyre Pshat in the Mamer. A Yid is Emuna, the Emuna is Betava, and you bring the Emuna to Eser Koiches HaNefesh, so on the one hand it's 20, on the other hand it's 10, and it's Kechenat. Then it finishes. Zehu. When you understand that Machtes HaShekel has two ideas. Number one is Emuna. Number 2, it's the internalization of Emuna to the Keches HaNefesh. And it is Emuna. We can explain Biur Kishur Hadvarim Ba'drushim Halakas. There's a number of Maimorim on this pasuk. In the footnote 8, he's Mitzayin to Teda Eir and Teda Chayim and the Mamer of Tavshnei Aleph of the Rebbe that followed the following scheme. Meviim pasuk Tisa Reish. First bring the pasuk about Tisa raising up the heads of the Jewish people. Mefarshim Miyad, right after you say Tisa Reish, you speak about Emuna. That somehow in Machzis HaShekel there's an Emuna, which is two different things. Number 1, Emuna, and number 2, Emuna, the internalization of faith. And you finish with Kaparas HaNefesh. So the 3 ideas is counting Jews, shepherding faith, and Kaparas HaNefesh. You give a Machzis HaShekel to count Yidden. In giving a Machzis HaShekel to count Yidden, there's an Emuna. And in giving Machzis HaShekel to count Yidden, there's an Emuna, it's a Kaparas HaNefesh. Now, these 2.5 lines don't make any sense based on what we said before. These 2.5 lines are segue to what he's going to say now. And what he's going to say now is the point that I told you earlier and I showed you earlier. That this Mamer begins where Avraham Avinu's Emuna ends. Every year there's Emuna from Avraham Avinu. On top of the Emuna from Avraham Avinu B'Teva, the Lashon had before on the bottom of page 95, there is the Emuna of Avraham Avinu, which is through Hisbonenus. Then comes Tisa Reish. Moshe Rabbeinu raises up our Emuna to a higher level. That it's not only higher than the Emuna that Avraham Avinu gives, it's higher than the Emuna of Avraham Avinu. It's higher than the Hisbonenus of Avraham Avinu. And what is the higher Emuna? So the Rebbe showed us in the part that I learned with you at the beginning. That the Emuna is not only that I have a relationship with the Eibishter, the way Elkus is connected to the world, Mamala Klam and Seviv Klam, but Emuna, a connection to the Eibishter as in the Torah. And Torah reveals the Eibishter, we have just no shaykhs to the world, what we call for lack of words, Atzmus Ein. And that's the Tachkiti says Reish. Moshe Rabbeinu is raising us up above the Emuna of Avraham Avinu, which is an Emuna from a Malak Kalam, and even an Emuna from Seviv Kalam, to an Emuna from Atzmus and Hus, because Moshe Rabbeinu gave us the Torah, and there was a bit of Gzeira, and like he brought the example from the Meseches Chulin, the Pirush Mishnah about Bris Milah, that we do it because of Moshe Rabbeinu, because of Avraham Avinu, because it's a higher idea. And once you appreciate that process, you understand the sequence of the Maimorim. Kiti says, Reish, Moshe Rabbeinu was raising us above Avraham's Emuna. Moshe Rabbeinu is even raising us above the Emuna of the Emuna of Avinu, which is the Inyan from Hisbonenus. And what is the new idea? Number 1, Moshe gives us a higher Emuna, which is called Machzis HaShekel. And number 2, there's a higher Emuna, which is at the Machzis HaShekel. Nimshon Keches Pnimiyah. So Machzis HaShekel represents the higher Emuna of Moshe Rabbeinu, and Machzis HaShekel represents how the higher Emuna of Moshe Rabbeinu is brought into the Keches HaNefesh, and that's the Estim Geir HaShekel, Machzis HaShekel. And that's why it finishes the Chapa Nefesh. When the person accesses the Emuna that Moshe Rabbeinu gives through the Torah, Torah gives a Yid Emuna on a Madrega which is completely above the world. It's above how the Eibush is connected to the world, but for Yochel, the Eibush as he is by himself. And this Emuna which Moshe Rabbeinu gives is represented first of all Machzis HaShekel, and second of all the Avodah of Machzis HaShekel, to internalize it. And that's what he explains in the next paragraph of Biyar Inyan Hudihine. And he develops it. All of us understand that Emuna is not about work. Why? It's inheritance from Avraham Avinu, called Reish Lama'aminu, the father of Emuna. Eitzel kol echad miyisrael, by every single yid, like it says in the pasuk Chudi Mirei Shamon. No, we all have a gift from the first believer, who's called Reish Lama'aminu, which is Avraham Avinu. We all have a connection to the Eibishter. Emuna doesn't mean they know the Eibishter intellectually. Emuna means I have a connection to the Eibishter, and every yid has that connection to the Eibishter of Avraham Avinu. And he brings it out from the famous Rambam Hilchos Gerishin that he always talks as Yisrael mitzat Jew, because of his nature. And you have to say over here that the word Teva again means not Teva as it is in Perek Ches and Tanya, and that it is in Perek Chav Daled in Tanya, Uvakama Mekemis, but Davke Teva as it is in Perek Yud Tes in Tanya. We speak in the Teva of the Nefesh Elokis, but Teva Zeh is Shema Mushul Lechol Dover Sheni Bebechinas Tavadas. The Emuna is the Teva of the Nefesh Elokis. It reits Elokayim Kol HaMitzvot, always wants what the Eibishter wants, and that's why when a yid doesn't want to bring a korban, and he's mechoyev keifenei machem reitzani, because every yid wants to bring korbanos, and the same is true when a yid even gerish. Rak, however, even though the teva of a yid that he wants what the Eibishter wants, a yid nicht der will, nicht der konvert, obvious of vergettlichkeit. So why do you have to hit him? Kefanese. Shekadei shalai yanam, and the kisuf of the Eibishter wants nothing to be for free. Because if it's a free, it's shameful. And even Emuna, that mitadach he gave us, and mitadach sheni, he makes it that we have a breda. He puts into our teva that we should do what the Eibishter wants, and he somehow arranged it that we should have a bechira chavshis about the teva itself. And therefore, he be'efen kazeh, this teva, that a yid wants to do what Hashem wants, and he can't help himself, is be'efen kazeh in the kind of way the ein lo shaychas al kichesav ha'pratim, it's not connected to individual faculties of a person. The Gemara says a thief at the opening to the tunnel that he digs to steal, and the Torah brings against a Kaddish in that he's even ready to murder, and he died. Of course, you know that this Gemara is not in the Masechta Berachos, but it's Jesus and Yankiv in Masechta Berachos, which is considered reliable. He believes in the Eibishter because that's his teva. Nevertheless, the Emuna does not change him automatically. Meaning, there's one in of Machtas Shekel that I have a belief in the Eibishter, and there's not the second in the Machtas Shekel that I internalize it into my person. Over his behavior, malignant that should hold him back from stealing. To be sure, he's using his faith. Lots of do the opposite of what the Eibishter wants. In other words, he davens that he shouldn't get caught. He should succeed in his gneva. So what's the word? The emes is the teva of a yid that he must do what the Eibishter wants. But the Eibishter does it in such a way that still we have bechira chavshis, and we have to have an avoida to make this teva ours, to make this teva apel mamish de gezach. You know, the Rebbe has a ha'ara. In the Mamer al Kein Karul Yom Eida Purim from Tafshin Yud Gimel, which is of course the Mamer which quote unquote the Rebbe calls the Mamer that the Rebbe killed Stalin. It was the Mamer that the Rebbe said late at night in the Fabring in the Tafshin Yud Gimel after the Rebbe told the story of ורעה. My father remembers it. My father was almost 15. He had just come from Europe. He had Schwarzheit, and now this was Purim. They were living in Philadelphia. They must have come for the Fabring. I don't know how it was. But he remembers the Fabring. And the Pratim he didn't remember so well, but the Nekuda he remembered that the Rebbe told the story ורעה, and then he said the Mamer, and we found that a couple of days later that Mamish at that time Stalin died. So in that Mamer, so the Rebbe was Bagiyah that Mamer in Nunalef, 48 years after. 38 years after, pardon me. And the Rebbe allowed them to put in the Pesach Dover this, that I just told you, that it was verbunden mit the Hapalasei from Tzeder Yisrael Be'esei Hazman. But the Maimon it's a Maimon Goydel. I mean, the Maimon, the Bilti Mug is very short. It's 3 pages. But it's so I don't know how. I mean, there's no tape. Put him Tafshin Gimel, there's no tape. So how much time it took when the Rebbe said his Veismanish? In other words, did the Rebbe write it only Bekitz? It's possible. It's also possible the Rebbe spoke Bekitz, and then when he developed the Maimon, he built it up. But near the end of the Maimon, there's a footnote. Where the Rebbe talks about the question of Bechira Chavshis and Yechida. That it says in Tanya that beside Yechida Shebenefesh, this is Tanya Perikit Ches, which he calls Chochma Shebenefesh. You never have the word Yechida in Tanya. You have the word Chochma Shebenefesh. That is Mesa Nafshe, right? Is Beli Shum Tam Vadas Vatainu Man Neklau Ukilu Hu Dovsher Doveshi Efshe Klau Lichba the Shemachad. It's he can't do it. A Yid cannot cross that line. When a person doesn't have Aveda, he tells himself, I'm still a good Jew. Then I'll be a Dusa. Like it doesn't better get Gimel. And if a person doesn't have Aveda, and this Aveda to him would mean that he's crossing over that line, he can't do it. So this footnote, the Rebbe has a kasha. If you say, it's an obvious question, if you say that inside Yechida Shebenefesh, it's Ef Shekal Lichba, the Shem Echad, so then he has no Bechira. If he has no Bechira, so who's Mesa Nefesh? The Eibush is Mesa Nefesh. So the Rebbe doesn't fully explain it. He simply states that it says in the Rambam that the Bechira Chavsh is the Iker Godel. And it's the whole Yiddishkeit depends on the thing Bechira Chavsh. So it's very, very hard to say that even when you have a Gili of Yechida, that you don't have Bechira. How you reconcile the two, Gittanish to Verstehen, Rebbe doesn't explain how. But he simply states, you figure out how, but it's very hard to say that because of the Gili of Yechida, you have no Bechira. Here the Rebbe is explaining. that you have Emuna. And the Emuna is your teva. And again, as I told you before, you have to say this teva of nefesh elokis, which the Rambam brings halacha. L'ritzeine, right? The person brings a korban l'ritzeine. You can't bring a korban behechrech, and a person is a chiyuv to bring a korban l'ritzeine. When they're vilnish, think with them. Keifen Hashem Ereitzan. Everybody knows the example from Hilchas Gittin, because that's where the Rambam explains it. But Keifen Hashem Ereitzan is not just when a person is mechuyev to give his wife a get up and he gives his wife b'kfiyah. But a person brings a korban. He doesn't want to. And it's tzeinei. I'm forgetting the whole pasuk, but the korban has to be l'tzeinei. So, but on the other hand, if he's mechuyev, he has to bring it. So keifen eicha, you force him till he wants to. And what's the hasbara shebedavar? That when you force him until he wants to, since he's mechuyev, we say that that's his ratzon amiti. So the Rebbe explains it from a different angle. The angle that Rebbe explains is that since Hashem doesn't want to take away a free will, so even something which is our teva, he makes in the kind of way that kvayachal we have a choice. And it's very similar to this idea that even Yechida somehow was a choice, even though it's a teva. But see that, be that as it may, our Mamer is not talking about Mesilas Nefesh, our Mamer is talking about doing the Eibush, talking about Emuna, connection to the Eibush. And of course, if you have a real connection to the Eibush, you want to do what the Eibush wants. And nevertheless, it's possible that the Emuna should be Heipach Terasna the Eibush. Well, the Zeis and dash 4, which is by number 12 in your text. If you look at my pencil, the Emuna needs shepherding, needs strengthening. It's very similar to the notion of shepherding sheep. That but the sheep already exists. You have to strengthen by the shepherd, the sheep, by giving it food and giving it panasa, whatever panasa means by an animal. There's chizuk and panas. There should be as it must be. And what is kedeboy? It should affect the inner faculty of the person. And again, in the language of this Mamer, there's the Emuna, which is machtas HaShekel. And there's the connection of the Emuna to the machtas, to the Esakech HaNefesh, which is also machtas HaShekel. So it's two machtas HaShekel, and both together add up to one machtas. And that's the Emuna. This is machtas HaShekel. Giving machtas HaShekel is Emuna, and giving machtas HaShekel is the internalization of the Emuna. So that's why the pasuk speaks about Esrim Gera HaShekel, machtas HaShekel, because you're not just giving machtas, you're actually giving a shekel al-Kodesh. You're giving Emuna, and you're giving that the Emuna that you're going to give is going to be internalized into your person, and that becomes Keif and Nafsh. And it continues, we understand now that there's two in Yonam. Number one, Emuna. And number two, the internalization of Emuna. So to connect Emuna with the Kechas HaPratim, there's two eitzes. All of the first eitzah is that you have to study. The Hainu, Kishi is Bain and Bazeh want us to contemplate Bazeh Shumaim in this that he believes. And it's very, very important to understand this. And it's very, very important to understand this correctly. I'm a teacher. I teach kids. And so often they misunderstand what Chabad Chassidus means. They think Chabad Chassidus means philosophy and questioning and logic and proof and doubt. Chabad Chassidus is none of the above. Chabad Chassidus is a Chassidus. It's not a philosophy. We have Sifrei Chkira. Rambam is Sifrei Chkira. The Ralbag is Sifrei Chkira. The Kuzari is Sifrei Chkira, but not Chassidus, not Tanya. Chassidus accepts that the Eibishter is real, and all of the learning is not to prove the Eibishter, all of the learning is to earn the Eibishter we have. That's why I always tell my students, you know, Chassidus Chabad, you're not going to find a proof for anything. Not proof for the Eibishter, not proof for Amitas HaTeira, not proof for Nevuah, nothing. Chassidus doesn't prove things, it explains what you already believe, but you believe first. And that's what the Rebbe is describing here. You believe in the Eibishter, period. And the Hisbonenus is not proof for that faith. The Hisbonenus is the study of that faith, the understanding of what I believe. Not that my understanding is supposed to undermine the faith, but understanding is supposed to personalize the faith. The Eibishter is emes. Teir is emes. Now I want to understand. And I want to understand so that my sense of the Eibishter being emes and my sense in the Teir being emes should be emes to me in my behavioral life. So the Hisbonenus is only supporting the Emuna and not questioning it, chas v'shol. And basically what you're meditating is that you shouldn't say that there's an Eibishter, but the Eibishter is not involved, like the Goyim say, he's removed from the world, the Eibishter is invested in this world. We say his involvement is in a specific idea, and a specific proactivity, because we believe in Ashkacha Pratis, especially Chassidus, the Baal Shem Tov believes in Ashkacha Pratis, a feel of all that tzach. Shalim Espal, Alavaya, one davens to the Eibishter. She has Ren, the Eibishter should help him, Payochol, she has Liach, Begnevase, she should succeed in his Geneva. This is L'Reis, which is Dava Prati, Binyan Prati. So he already believes that the Eibishter gets involved in Torah. That Ayid Gavet Yenim's tefillin. Reuven stole Shimon's tefillin. The names are, of course, fictitious. And Shimon was in a panic. He didn't know what to do. Who was the Rebbe? The Mizitcher Magid. So the Mizitcher Magid told Shimon, go back to Reuven and tell him Reuven took your tefillin. But Reuven's going to deny it. So scream at him. Get really in his face. In other words, make sure he knows that you know for sure that he's took his tefillin and won't be able to deny. So Reuven went to Shimon. And he starts to tell Shimon, you took my tefillin, and Shimon is denying it. Reuven starts to scream, and Shimon starts to scream back. But Reuven insists until Shimon realizes that Reuven Taka knows, and he gives him back his tefillin. And then he tells him, nobody saw me take your tefillin, how do you know? So Reuven said, I went to the Rebbe, to the Magid, and the Rebbe told me. So Shimon went away to the Magid. If I mixed up the names, don't worry about it. I'm sorry. It's just fictitious names. And he says, Rebbe, I understand that a Rebbe has Ruach HaKodesh, but that's what you do with your Ruach HaKodesh. You see who's stealing from whom. The Magid gesagt, das habe ich gesehen in Besekise. I saw this in the bathroom. Verstehst? Here is a Yid who's using Tefillah, and he's using his Emuna and Ashkacha Pratis to help him ask the Eibishter to be Eiver in one of the Avedas, so the Seres HaDibris. If he believes the Eibishter can help him in this particular case. That's why he davens. I'm about to enter this home on this evening to steal this diamond, and I'm asking the Eibishter to help me right now, right here. I believe that he can help me in Eifim Prati. So here comes the Hisbonenus. If I believe that the Eibishter can help a Ganef in a particular Genev in a particular time and space, that means I believe not just the Eibishter exists in a way of Rama Kol Goyim, but I believe the Eibishter is imminent, right? Hislapshus, Ashkacha Pratis. Hariyachal Espal Hashem. For the same token, I could daven sheyozun v'yifanis eisei be'efenache provide me my mizenas and my panos in a different way. V'ozla yitztadech lignav. I wouldn't need to steal. Top of page 97 now. So this is the Hisbonenus. You're misboinen in not just in the Eibishter. You're misboinen in the tefillah of the Ganef. The Ganef davens because he believes in the Eibishter. But he doesn't believe in the Eibishter enough to do what the Eibishter says. But he does believe in the Eibishter enough that the Eibishter is going to help him steal. So switch that around to be misboinen that the Eibishter provide provasa and not the Eifin. And the Rebbe says, Shari lav b'rishiyah skina. That this Ganef is echet nishka rasha. Stealing is an avera. The Rebbe says he's not a rasha, so why is he stealing? Mashu geinev hu mitzazeh shu tzorech l'parnasa. He's stealing because he needs to feed his family, and one of the ways of making a living, unfortunately, is through Gneva. As the Pasuk says, La yavezu laganim ki yignev, lamale nefesh ki yiroyev, ki yirev, ganav ganvit. Well, it's a Pasuk in Mishlei, which I've never learned. But the Pasuk speaks for itself. Don't be upset at the ganav who steals if he's stealing pasha to bring home lechem lefiyatav. Some people steal for luxuries, for what they call a standard of living, but this person is stealing lamale nefesh ki yiroyev, ki yirev. And he's not stealing because he's a Rosh, he's stealing because this is how the Eibishter can be fanas. If he believes in the Eibishter, and he believes in the Eibishter's Hashkacha Pratis to help him in the Gneva, Islam, or Leilig, Gnev, why should he daven the Eibishter to help him steal and steal? Hare Yochel is now, he can say he is Barach, he could ask what the Eibishter wants. Ulis Falala the Shem, daven the Eibishter, she fanas Eisei, that you give panos in another way. This is a very unusual shtikele. That you're not just learning from the Ganef, that you believe, you're learning from the Ganef that you believe in the Ashkacha Pratis. And the Ganef is choosing to use those Emunas to ask the Eibishter to be Mashgiach B'Ashkacha Pratis to help him do an Aveda. And you're taking that Hisbonenus saying, I'm going to ask the Eibishter to give him Panosla and Avkasher Neif in a kosher way. And he finishes, V'Hisbonenus muvenes afilu b'seichel nefesh hasichlas. This idea that you know the Ganef who davens before he steals, and you understand that his davening before steals is a proof that not only he believes in Hashem, but he believes in Hashgacha Pratis, this is Hisbonenus, your intellectual soul can understand as well. Even your animal soul. And therefore your avodah is to think about this, and therefore to conclude that you should ask the Eibush of Panos in a way which is kosher. This is an illustration of what it means. You do a contemplation, which is called Avana Vasaga, Hisbonenus, to connect you that I believe in the Eibishter, and therefore I'm going to live my life according to that belief. So I'm not going to ask the Eibishter to help me steal, even if I'm stealing for Panos. I'm going to ask the Eibishter to give me Panos, which is kosher. They tell a story. When the Frierdiker Rebbe became Rebbe, it was a very difficult time. It was the middle of the civil war in the Soviet Union, in Russia, which would then become the Soviet Union. And they were killing Jews like flies. There was 3 different fights. It was the Weissem and the Reitem and the Schwarze. They all had one thing in common. They hated Jews. And there were pogroms, gefährlich. Going on a train was a sakon and a fascist, because they literally would throw you off the train as the train was moving downhill. Rishis. Sinister. So a Yid was somehow beaten up. I don't know exactly the pratim. And he was mispalo as al kuman lekevi Yisrael. He sent the pidyon to the Frierdiker Rebbe that should come to Kevi Yisrael. He was later by the Frierdiker Rebbe in Astov, and the Frierdiker Rebbe said to him, "Da wissen wie zu beten. You have to know how to ask." And he wasn't Meidach Yomim. He passed away shortly thereafter, and he came to Kevi Yisrael. And the Rebbe told me, you should have written a pidyon for Arichas Yomim, for Hachlama, for Refuah Shleima. He asked, he wrote a pidyon nefesh to the Frierdiker Rebbe, to the previous Rebbe, that he should come to Kevi Yisrael. He should be buried like a Jew. And the Rebbe said, that's not how you ask. So here you have a similar situation. If you believe in the Eibishter and you mispalel to the Eibishter for a parnosa, that's not how you ask. And the purpose of this Hisbonenus is to establish in yourself that this teva, as the Rebbe said in the beginning of the previous paragraph, and he also mentioned it, as I mentioned to you before, 3 lines from the bottom of page 95, which is the teva nefesh l'kis, not teva nefesh, it's teva nefesh l'kis, which means it's l'mayla mitam vadas. Shem amusha l'chol dover shu eni b'bchinas tam vadas. Then uses the connection to the Eibishter. But the Eibishter made it that you have to work to make that Emuna yours. That means to live by it. And one of the ways of coming to live by it is by using your mind to internalize the faith. And he gave the dogma from the Ganav himself, which I find fascinating. Next paragraph. Our Pasuk begins to raise up the head, which means Hainu she'Emuna tzarach liyas kameshi mitzad Moshe. That not only are you being raised above the Emunah of Avraham Avinu, you're being raised above the Hisbonenus, which is the Hischaskus of the Emunah of Avraham Avinu. Tisa, you have to raise up the mind. You use your mind to fortify your faith based on the Emunah of Avraham Avinu, which I showed you in the piece that we read in the introduction to the Mamer, means a connection to the Eibishter, because the Eibishter gives life to the world, Mamala Kalam, and the Eibishter's existence to the world, Save of Kalam. And so you're relating to the Eibishter. And you relate to the Eibishter in a real enough way that because of that relationship, you're going to do what he says. You're not going to do chas v'shalom heipach of what he says. But it's only the Eibishter who's the provider for the creation, for you and for me. On the 2 levels of Mamalik Alalman and Seviv Kalam. Moshe Rabbeinu gave us the Torah. And Moshe Rabbeinu gave us the Torah, he gave us the Eibishter, Anechi. And the Anechi Kvayachal, which the Eibishter wrote into the Torah, is not only Kvayachal Hashem as the creator. Hashem is the provider, Hashem is the giver of life, but Hashem as he exists by himself. And in the Torah, and through the Torah, Yid has the capacity to have a relationship with the Eibishter, Kvayachal, as he is by himself. And therefore, Moshe Rabbeinu was told by the Eibishter, raise up Yidin's Emuna, higher than the Emuna of Avraham Avinu, and even higher than the Emuna of Avraham Avinu, to the Madrega of Machtes HaShekel. And here there's going to be 2 in Yonim as well. How the Emuna comes from Machtes HaShekel, and how the internalization of Emuna comes from Machtes HaShekel. You already have Emuna from Avinu. Moreover, you've internalized that faith. To gain the Eibishter Kvayachal. Hashem comes along to Moshe Rabbeinu and tells them, Tisa, reish, einim aspek, it's not enough. Hashem tells Moshe, it's your role to raise Yidden up above the Emunah of Avraham Avinu and above the personalization, internalization of the Emunah of Avraham Avinu, which is called reish, to a higher madrega. Harama ba'asagezu, to lift up Yidden in their understanding of Elokus, which is going to fortify their Emunah. Look at Moshe, he mitzad Moshe. They should have Emunah on the madrega of Moshe Rabbeinu. And then comes the piece we learned already, where he explains what Avraham Avinu's Emuna was and what Moshe Rabbeinu's Emuna is. And again, usually we say that Avraham gave us Emuna and Moshe is mechazek the Emuna of Avraham Avinu. In this Mamer, Shtayim Shehein Arba, Avraham Avinu gave us Emuna and the chiluk of Emuna through Shekel, through Hisbonenus. And Moshe Rabbeinu gave us Emuna ki Tisa Reish, higher than Shekel. And now the higher than Shekel is represented by Machtes HaShekel, and then the Machtes HaShekel is internalized. So it's one Machtes HaShekel that adds up to Esrim Gena. First of all, the Machzah Shekel is an idea which is higher than Shekel. And again, I don't know which way you go in this. You can either say Machzah Shekel means Kimin Madbei Shalesh, like I told you before, or that Machzah Shekel means the recognition that by myself I'm not whole. I need the Eibishter, I need another Jew, I need my Makivim Shabenefesh, I need my Nefshel Kis Nefesh happens to be joined together. And then there is the avodah of bringing that acknowledgement, that admission of I'm not whole without another into my life. So the recognition that I'm not whole without another is the basis for my Emuna. In other words, it connects me to something which is above reason. That humility, if you will, connects me to something which is above reason. And then internalizing that is the other half of Machzah Shekel, that even though it's two halves of a Machzah Shekel, together they add up to one Machzah Shekel because you're simply bringing the Emuna into the Keches HaNefesh. I still don't know what the avodah is. I still don't understand, number one, how Machzah Shekel is Emuna, which is higher than Seichel, and how there is another avodah above the Machzah Shekel to internalize it. As much as I've explained it, I don't understand it. But we're going to leave it. What can I say? Page 98 now, second paragraph. V'zehu, and this is the pshat in the Pasuk. I want to point out what we said on page 96. First paragraph, the last three lines. V'zehu bir. Kishan advarim, ba'adrushim ala kosef, shmavim kitisas reish, umiyad ur'ei Emuna, umisayim emlechapa nafshi sechem. And the Rebbe was wondering what's the sequence, and here's the answer. Kitisas reish means you have to have Emuna more than the Emuna of Moshe Rabbeinu, of Avraham Avinu, and this is Machzah Shekel, and it's internalized ur'ei Emuna also through Machzah Shekel, and that brings the kefa nafshi. So the Rebbe is showing us how this Mamer, which is really saying something very different than the most Maimonim. Most Maimonim say that Avraham gives us Emuna and Moshe is the Re'ei Emuna. This Mamer is saying Avraham gives us Emuna and his own Re'ei Emuna, and then Moshe gives us a new Emuna and Atzmus Musa Sav Baruch Hu. Halakus, which is completely removed from the world, becomes personal to a Yid, or Re'ei Emuna. This is internalized, and both of those ideas are represented by Machzah Shekel. So the Maimonim makes sense, in other words. That's what these words mean. That the Maimonim, the secrets of the Emuna make sense if you appreciate what this Mamer says. That Moshe Rabbeinu is not simply fortifying the Emunah of Avraham Avinu, but is giving us a new Emunah and then teaching us how to fortify it, and then the Mamer makes sense. When the Rebbe finished Tisa, Reish B'nai Yisrael, Moshe Rabbeinu was told by the Eibush should lift up the head of the Jewish people. That after Kvar Yesh, Emuna, we already have Emunah from Avraham Avinu. Moreover, we have the internalization of that faith, because we understand we're misboinen in our relationship with the Eibishter and the belief that we have in the Ashgacha Pratis to serve, to live our lives in a way which are consistent with our connection to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. And all of this is mitzad Yerushim Ha'avis, says the Rebbe Hainu B'chinas Reish B'nai. So that's called the head of the Jewish people, because you don't only have Emuna, you also have Hisbonenus. Comes again the Eibishter to Moshe Rabbeinu, comes to Moshe Rabbeinu after Matan Torah, and he tells him, Tzarech li yizki Tisas Reish B'nai Yisrael. Hashem is instructing Moshe Rabbeinu to give us a whole new Emuna Haramo. That in the Emunah we have Avraham Avinu, and the Emunah we have Avraham Avinu, which is Hisbonenus. You have to add another dimension. Emunah tia bebechinas nas beyesu, which have Emunah on a higher level, and this is the Emunah which is connected to Machzah Shekel. Emunah tia, the which Emunah should be laid out. It's not only Shekel kiyum the mitzvah se'elim, is that the whole sustaining of the form of the creation is because of the divine life which is invested in it. Like it says from the Baal Shem Tov in Tanya Perek Aleph, Sharichot. That every second the words of HaKadosh Baruch Hu are kayamim ve'em demetech l'kiyah shamayim. And Neshesh Metzi is the Elam Eis, there's a reality of worlds. And the reality of world is sustained every single second by the Eibush Mitzvah Elokus, which is a step in understanding Elokus and internalizing faith. Says the Rebbe, that's all from Avraham Avinu. Because Sof Kol Seif, not only is Chayis Mimalei kol almin, but even Havoya is Sovev kol almin. Sovev kol almin means indirectly connected to almin. So Avraham Avinu's Emuna is an Emuna on the level of Mimalei kol almin, and Emuna on the level of Sovev kol almin, which directly and indirectly are connected to Elamis. When Hashem gave us the Torah through Moshe Rabbeinu, who introduced to us Anechi, and he gives us the capacity for Emuna, for a relationship with the Eibishter on that level, Emuna, Sharein Mavade, belief in the Eibishter, where there's no world at all. The Eibishter is all by himself. And like it says in Chassidus on the Pasuk, and Nisi, that Mitzad Eibishter, that Kedim Shnivra Ha'elam, he was the only thing, and Achash Shnivra Ha'elam is also the only thing. When a person believes that the Eibishter creates the world and sustains the world, it's godliness which is in the world, meaning the world exists and the Eibishter is its master or its creator. Which is not only above the Emunah of Avraham Avinu and Malach Kalam and Sevi Kalam, but above the Emunah of Avraham Avinu, which is called Reish, which is to relate to Hashem as He's completely removed from the world. And of course, how can you know the Eibishter which is completely removed from the world? You can know the Eibishter which is in the world. And the answer is because it's in your neshama. And your access to your neshama on that level has to do with Moshe Rabbeinu and Bitla Gezed and not Avraham Avinu. When Hashem gave the Torah, and in the Torah He was Megala Anechi, through the Torah He was Megala in a Yid, also the Madrega of Anechi, and now you can have Emuna on that Madrega. Is the life of the Eibishter which sustains the world, is only Ha'ara. Mimalei Klau and even Sovev Klau. Atzmus is Barak Eibishter is by himself, lays Machshava Tisa Bei Klau, nobody can understand him. Ve'ein Eid Milvade, and on that level, besides him, there's nothing. On the level of Atzmus and Hus, if anything exists, it's Atzmus and Hus. And if it's not Atzmus and Hus, it doesn't exist. The world is Holocaust. And Amshachas Emuna Zuay de Moshe Rabbeinu gives us the ability to have a relationship with Eibishter. Emuna means a relationship with the Eibishter on that Madreg. And the focus here is not on the Chochmah of Torah, but the fact that Torah is Miuchadis Atzmus, is Baruch Shalom Ma'alim Magid Elamis, Torah the Eibishter, like it says in Zer, Ayraisa V'Kushivich Kol Echad. And if you remember Tanya Perek Daled, the Alter Rebbe used Ayraisa V'Kushivich Kol Echad not just for Torah, but also for mitzvahs. And here the Rebbe is saying, and I'm not saying it's a contradiction, I'm just mentioning that when a Yid studies Torah, the connection to the Eibush that he gets through Torah is the Madrega of Anech. He knows Hashem, which is completely removed from the world. And he's supposed to give it to Yidden. Mamshech be Yisrael. This Moshe Rabbeinu gives the Jewish people that Yisrael, Yidden, through the Torah, with the Eibush. Of course, this is the first level, that Yisrael, the Eraisa, become one with Kuchabrichu, and the second level Yisrael with Kuchabrichu Kol Echad U'Mechadik Mekach the Torah with Eibishter. But even the first level is the Torah gives us a nech. The Torah gives us the gift of Nafshik Savis Yehavis, that for Yachal in the Torah the Eibishter wrote himself in, and not the Eibishter that's the Beira Yelam or Mechayas Elam. The Eibush as he is Eineid Movadi. That's what the pasuk is saying to Moshe. Hashem tells Moshe Rabbeinu, "Hey, bof Yidden hecher for the Emunah from Avraham Avinu." Lift up the Jewish people not only above the Emunah of Avraham Avinu, but even this Chaskas of Emunah, which is Kitis Sesreish. And Amshach Azu in Yonesh Amachza Shekel, giving us this higher Emunah is first of all the Yin of Machza Shekel, and second of all the internalization of Machza Shekel into their person, which is called Esrim Gera Machza Shekel. When a person connects to the Eibush on the level of Machza Shekel, and I don't know what to say, but let's say you give the Eibush your own fire, or you tell the Eibush that I'm incomplete without you, I'm incomplete without another Yid, I'm incomplete without my Makifim B'chuli. And that admission, that humility, gives us a connection to Hashem and a Madreg, which is above the world. And then we internalize it to live that way. That becomes an atonement for the nefesh, and the word kapora is lekanech, to clean. And loshen kapora, like it says in the Geras HaTshuva, kapara means to atone. Hashem should forgive, and kapara means to clean. And when you give machzas shekel, and you internalize machzas shekel, in other words, you have a Emunah on a madrega which is above seichel, and you internalize that Emunah above seichel through the machzas shekel, so then you have kapora, and it's pale b'chol kechesav mamayla lamata lamayla, which is esem. And l'chayda, these words, mamayla lamata lamayla, is the same machzas shekel on the two halves. The Machzah Shekel by itself is the Emuna of Moshe Rabbeinu, and the internalization of Machzah Shekel with the Keichas HaNefesh, this is the Emuna of Moshe Rabbeinu. And both of those levels are called Ketisas Reish. So that's the Chiddush of this Mamer. That Moshe Rabbeinu is not just be Mechazah, the Emuna of Avraham Avinu, as is in so many Maimorim. Avraham is Mechazah, the Emuna of Avraham Avinu. And Moshe is told by the Eibush to introduce Yidden to new Emuna and give them the Pnimius of that Emuna, which is through the Avodah of Machzah Shekel. And Hakach, Boyim, Labachin, Eshetiel Yossi, the all ends of Mashiach is going to come. What about the Rosh Hashanah of Yadaita? Which is where this idea of Shekel and Emuna and different levels of Das and different levels of Emuna are discussed. This level of Emuna, of Moshe Rabbeinu, which is relating to the Eibishter, which is completely disconnected from the creation, is going to be the Vasaga. We're going to be able to understand it. How do you understand something which you have no frame of reference for? I don't know, but that's what the Pasuk says. That the Madrega of Yam, I want to discuss here, is going to be Deya. So he translates that as Menamayim Mishisu. The sea is an ocean of faith, an ocean of being washed away with, and we're going to be taken out of that water. We're going to have Yediyah. So if Atzmus, which now is even Emuna, and even an Emuna, the Machzah Shekel is going to become Yediyah, so Emuna is going to be even higher than that. Which is even higher than how, because of that the Yid has a sense of Ein Mavali of the Eibush. And of course, this I for sure don't understand, but we're going to call it a class. And I hope, Li Neder, to give you on Monday the Mamer of Tisa from Shabbos Purim. Shabbos after Purim, Tafshin Lamadalad, and then next Friday we'll do HaChodesh from Shabbos, Parshas Shabbos HaChodesh from Tafshin Lamadalad, and then I'll find something else to do. Okay, it's after Shabbos, so good luck.